So we've got bad news on the Wu flu front. We've got two new epicenters outside of China opening up, in addition to Singapore and Japan. And in fact, both of these places, very quickly it looks, are turning out to be worse than Singapore and Japan. In Japan and Singapore, they've had steady increases in cases, but they've been pretty transparent with their people about it, and it doesn't look like it's it's really taken off there yet and gone, with exponential growth or anything, and certainly nothing like we've seen in China. However, in South Korea, over the last couple days, things have gotten really, really bad. Apparently, we had a super spreader and a super duper spreader who is a member of some, in Korea they have these big, mega churches like we do in the U.S., which I find interesting because I thought that was more of an American phenomenon, but perhaps America's influence in Korea led to that. But anyway, there's a woman who was a member of one of these big mega churches who caught the Wu flu, and then she went to church and spread it to pretty much everyone in there. So, like 500 people or some odd number were exposed to this, at that church service. And so now South Korea has over 200 people so far who have tested positive for the virus. And there are now 2 people who have died from it. And we're already hearing horror stories about how the hospitals are overcrowded, which, that's pretty bad if you can't handle 200 people. I guess, South Korea was not poised for this. You would think that most of the countries in Asia, in this area around China, especially if you're, as close to it as Korea, would be, preparing ahead of time for this outbreak and be trying to set up facilities so that you could process all of these cases. But in South Korea, that just already seems to have broken down. And so I guess, once things have taken off like this, you wouldn't expect it to slow down anytime soon. It's not like South Korea is going to introduce the quarantine measures like they have in Wuhan, to where people are just, are forced to stay in their home, and they completely shut down the entire economy of the country. Now, in addition to this confirmed super spreader, who gave it to all the fellow parishioners at the church, there was a soldier on that, I can't remember the name of it, but there's an island south of the Korean peninsula, which is, controlled by South Korea, and there is a soldier there, I guess, who caught the Wu flu, and people are afraid that, he would have spread it in the barracks, because, of course, in military barracks, men live in very close quarters, and there's all sorts of, it's just like a cruise ship. Actually, worse than a cruise ship. It's more like a hospital, the proximity in which you have people. So all it would take is, one little sneeze, and perhaps the entire room could be infected. And they are not quarantining any of these people who, were in the barracks with this guy. They're only quarantining the man himself, which seems like a bad idea for now. Now, the U.S. military, which of course has a lot of troops in South Korea, pretty much anywhere that America's ever fought a war, they have a lot of troops still there. And so the U.S. has issued a directive that troops are only to leave the base on official business. And that I believe no one is allowed to go to this town in which the all of these cases are spreading. Because of course this wasn't Seoul, the capital in which this happened to happen. This church is located in a town to the south. Seoul, of course, being pretty much the northernmost city in South Korea, it is right on the border with North Korea. Seoul, of course, is a massive city of millions and millions of people, and so as soon as the virus really breaks out there, that will be I think will burn up pretty quickly. That'll go up in flames, just like Wuhan did. And considering that in this other city that they're having such a big problem with all of this, I would imagine that here in the next few days we're going to be hearing about a lot of cases coming out of Seoul. Now, in addition to South Korea, there is one other country, one which people might not have expected, that is turning out to have a very serious problem with the Wu flu, and that is Iran. Now, as of a couple days ago, Iran had no cases of the Wu flu, and then all of a sudden they reported that they had 2 cases, and they were both dead, which in and of itself is odd, because first of all, this illness doesn't seem to be killing everyone who gets it. It seems to be killing a pretty small percentage of people, and so the odds that the only two people who had it in Iran would, die on the same day that they're tested seems pretty odd. Now, I guess you could say, well, Iran wasn't expecting to have the Wu flu. They didn't see this coming because they're not right around China. Of course, they are pretty close to China, but I guess they might not have the closest ties with them, with Chinese people coming in and out all the time. So perhaps they just didn't expect it, and so after these people died, maybe somebody got the idea, let's go ahead and test them for Wu flu, and it turned out to be what they had. Now, the other alternative is that Iran just didn't want to say that they had Wu flu, and they knew they had cases this whole time. And it was only after 2 people died that they figured, oh, well, I guess we ought to, announce this publicly. Because ever since those 2 people died, now all of a sudden Iran has a lot more cases. I believe last I checked this morning, they're claiming that they have 18. But I have a feeling that it's a lot more than that, because the Iranian Ministry of Health is sounding pretty scared. They said, hey, it's possible that the Wu flu is already, in every city in Iran, which is a pretty stark thing to say when you only have 18 cases in the whole country, and you're a country of, 50 million people. But the Iranian Ministry of Health is basically telling people, hey, this is scary, and you need to watch what you're doing. Now, another factor behind why Iran all of a sudden might be acting scared and being pretty forthright with its people is that now people are showing up outside of Iran who traveled to the country recently and are testing positive for Wu flu. I heard this morning there was a woman in British Columbia, up in Canada, who is Canada's 6th case of coronavirus. She's never been to China, but she just got back from Iran. That's going to set off some headlines. Now, Lebanon also is reporting their first case of coronavirus. Guess what? The person there, never been to China, but they just got back from Iran. And so if, random people who just happen to be traveling through Iran are showing up in other countries who have this, you have 2 cases of at least just what I saw briefly this morning, of coronavirus outside of Iran that are linked to Iran. Well, how many cases are there going to be in Iran? I would imagine a lot more than 18. Turkey, for its part, is taking no chances with this. They are saying they're going to screen every single person coming in through Iran or from Iran into Turkey, and if they have any sort of suspicious symptoms, well, they're not just going to get quarantined, they're going to get sent back to Iran. And so it looks like now that we have the Wu flu is going to be taking off here on 2 fronts. First in East Asia, and now in Central Asia, or Western Asia, I guess you'd call it, the Middle East essentially. And there's going to be absolutely no way to quarantine all the people in these Middle Eastern countries, in places like Lebanon or Iraq or Iran. They just don't have the resources to do what China is doing, and China really doesn't even have the resources to do what it's doing. I don't know how they're avoiding Western media covering the terrible supply chain disruptions that are coming from China's draconian quarantine measures, because anybody who's looking at this knows this is going to be a really, really big problem for the world economy. Because as I've said before, all these factories that are shut down in China don't just make, cheap made-in-China goods that, will go on the shelves at Walmart. They make, components for things that are made all around the world. Hyundai very early on had to shut down their factory in South Korea because not because they had, Wu flu cases amongst their employees. No, because they couldn't get parts from China anymore. And if this gets into the Middle East, well, what are they going to do? Shut down the oil wells? Could you imagine that? The chaos that would create if they had to quarantine, the oil wells? My guess is they're going to try and keep pumping for as long as possible until all the employees, just start dropping dead and they can't find anyone to man those positions. But it's something to think about. And something else odd that I find is that, the United States, a country of 320 million people, has been sitting pretty flat at 15 cases for a while now. Where are all these people in America who, theoretically should have caught it by now? Did the U.S. find some way of containing it, or is it just that, there's, a lot of people still in that incubation period who are not showing symptoms? I don't know, but I find it suspicious that the U.S. only has 15 cases. I mean, I would think that there's enough people who go back and forth between these various countries that you would have seen a little more by now, because we did see that those first few 15 show up pretty quickly. Now, maybe that's because travel with China was completely uninhibited at that point, and those people all caught it before anyone even knew that the Wu flu existed. I guess that's possible. But for now, I'm feeling pretty good that we in America seem to be somewhat safe from this virus. Although that's just from the direct, the virus itself. We are not going to be safe by any means from the economic repercussions of what this is going to do to oil production, or certainly to everything that's going on in China right now. I mean, there's no way of avoiding that. I don't know. I can't quantify what the problems are going to be, but this shutdown of the Chinese economy is not going to spare us. So with that said, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.